Coming up on Network Africa. UN report says Somali troops fought in the Tigray conflict. UNICEF says child labour on the rise for the first time since the year 2000. Plus, Zimbabwe's Chief Justice contempt charge dismissed. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin in East Africa with the Tigray conflict. A UN report alleges that troops from Somalia fought alongside Eritreans in Ethiopia's conflict-hit region. The report by UN Special Rapporteur Mohamed Babika says Somali fighters were reported to be present in the sacred Ethiopian city of Axum. The Somali federal government is denied involvement in the Tigray conflict. Eritrea did not cooperate in the UN investigation that mainly focused on the situation of human rights in Eritrea. The UN rapporteur says the report is based on observations and information from different sources. In February, rights group Amnesty International accused Eritrean troops in Axum of killing hundreds of people, mainly over 2 days in November. Eritrean authorities have dismissed the allegations. Meanwhile, the United Nations says incidents of denial of humanitarian movement, interrogation, assault, and detention of humanitarian workers at military checkpoints continues to be reported in the Tigray region. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric says that several areas remain inaccessible and the situation is critical. He adds that the UN continues to call for safe, unimpeded and sustained access to scale up the humanitarian response. Thousands of people are thought to have been killed since the conflict started in November last year, and nearly 2 million have fled their homes, many in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. Earlier this week, the UN chief warned that areas of Tigray were on the brink of famine.
Tigray, incidents of denial of humanitarian movement, interrogation, assault, and detention of humanitarian workers at military checkpoints continues to be reported. Looting and confiscation of humanitarian assets and supplies by the parties to the conflict have also been reported. Several areas in the region remain inaccessible. Of the accessible areas, the situation is dire, including dysfunctional water systems and limited or no health facilities. Level of food insecurity and malnutrition are at alarming levels. Preliminary field reports from Axum and Adwa in the central zone indicate visible signs of starvation among internally displaced people. In the community in the northwestern zone of Tigray, aid workers noted severe need for food after the burning or looting of harvests. Our humanitarian colleagues warn that partners receive worrying information that the government has instructed to proceed with relocating internally displaced people in their areas of origin. Despite these challenges, humanitarian partners are continuing to scale up the response as quickly as possible. More than 560,000 people were reached with food assistance just last week, bringing the number of people reached since late March to more than 3.3 million. And with the target having been 5.2 million. So we still need to reach a lot of people. We continue to call for safe, unimpeded, and sustained access to scale up the humanitarian response and to help all people in need. More funding is urgently needed for our operations.
Well, the VOA's Mohamed Kahiye is in Mogadishu. He joins us now to discuss that UN report saying Somali troops fought in the Tigray conflict. Mohamed, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Unconfirmed reports
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Unconfirmed reports that Somali soldiers were in Eritrea for military training and sent to fight in Tigray first made their rounds in January. families have protested, demanding information on their loved ones. Some families say they haven't heard from them in over a year. And now this UN report, more and more evidence continues to point to Somali involvement. What explanation has the federal government given?
That issue of Somali has been a big topic here in Somalia, especially in the capital. There have been some daily protests, especially today there was a protest by some of the parents who lost, who said they are still missing their children in Eritrea. But the government has responded today through the Minister of Information, which said that yes, they acknowledge that there's Somali troops in Eritrea for training, but there is no known or deployment of Somali troops alongside the Eritreans fighting in the troubled northern Ethiopian region of Tigray. And but the opposition and the parents who say that their children, who are the soldiers, say they called them and they say that they are being deployed there, but the government is still denying it and saying that the troops were airlifted to Eritrea a year ago for only for training purpose, and they're not involved whatsoever in the in Ethiopian conflict which is going in Tigray region.
Yeah, Mohammed, well, you have to remember that earlier this year, Somali lawmakers had demanded an investigation on the alleged troops fighting in Tigray. Did that produce any findings, and how are lawmakers reacting now in light of this report, which is said to be based on observations and information from different sources?
Well, the Parliament, through the Foreign Affairs and International Relations Committee, has written a letter to the Office of the President 2 times, and they haven't received any answers from the President. The President has been very silent about this. It's only the cabinet, which is maybe the information minister, who was speaking about this. But the parents and the opposition leaders and also the people who are concerned about this are pushing the president to speak about this, and whether the troops, of course, are fighting, if they are fighting there or not. They're saying that the only answer they want to hear now is the president, and not the information minister or any person who is in the government.
Earlier on in the Tigray conflict, there were fears that Somalia, which already has its hands full with its own security situation and upcoming elections, could be collateral damage of this crisis. 7 months into the crisis, how has the conflict impacted the country? Well,
of course, apart from this alleged deployment of the Somali troops from Eritrea, where they have been training, to Tigray, which borders which borders Eritrea, there's never been not much impact on Somalia, because Somalia doesn't border the Tigray region. The Tigray, it's on the northern part, and that part where the fighting is taking place is on the northern border, which borders the Eritrea. So the only impact that what is going on in Tigray right now had on Somalia is this ongoing debate whereby the troops were deployed, and some of them allegedly killed and others disappeared, and that is the topic which is now at the top of both the opposition and the parents, and also the government, which is being pushed to give answers.
And Mohammed, finally, just before I let you go, are there any indications that Eritrean troops are actually withdrawing from Tigray amid huge international condemnation?
Well, according to the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed some weeks ago, after a lot of pressure from the international agencies like the United Nations and also some countries like the United States, the Eritrean troops have pushed out from Tigray, but some independent researchers say that there are still some Eritrean troops which are still fighting inside Tigray. But from the Ethiopian government, they say that the troops have pulled out of the Tigray region.
All right, then the VOA's Mohamed Kahiye, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. And now over in the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 19 people have died in a series of clashes. The medical charity MSF reports that 10 civilians were killed when a hospital was destroyed in the eastern village of Buga on Monday. Several other bodies were reportedly found after farmers were targeted near the border between North Kivu and Ituri provinces. Frequent raids are carried out in the region by the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, one of dozens of armed groups in eastern DR Congo. Matthias Gilman, a spokesman of the UN peacekeeping mission, has called for more help to police the area. Fatou Bensouda has given her last briefing as chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, ICC, to the UN Security Council, lamenting that the tribunal has not yet brought justice to victims of atrocities in Sudan's Western Darfur region. But she says a new era in Sudan and the transfer of the first suspect to the court should give them hope. Bensouda says the Darfur victims she spoke to last week had one message: Sudan's transitional government should hand over 3 suspects sought by the court who are in its custody. Former President Omar al-Bashir, who is accused of genocide, former Defense Minister Abdel Rahim Hussein, and former Interim Minister and Governor Hamad Haroun. Bensouda's mandate ends on June the 15th after taking the position in 2012.
The developments in Sudan amply demonstrate that the arm of justice is long and patient, that justice may be relayed by those who stand in its way, but justice has more durability than politics of a few whose aim is to shield culpability. Justice and the voice of the people and the wronged ultimately prevailed. This first ever visit to ICC to Darfur in more than 15 years since this council referred the Darfur situation to my office has rekindled the hope of Resolution 1593. We cannot allow that rekindled light to be extinguished again through our inaction or half-hearted, ineffective action. Darfur victims continue to have hope in us. We must heed their clarion call for the surrender of those wanted by the ICC to face independent, impartial, and fair judicial process that respects all their rights, much as the alleged perpetrators themselves denied rights to the people of Darfur over the years. Sudan is under a legal obligation to surrender the suspects pursuant to Resolution 1593. The Juba Peace Agreement is also clear that all suspects must appear before the ICC and that Sudan should fully cooperate with ICC in its investigations and prosecution of these suspects.
Still to come on the program. We're celebrating Zimbabwean novelist Sisi Dangaremba, who has been awarded the PEN Painting Prize. Thanks for staying with us. According to the United Nations, child labor has increased to 160 million, the first rise in 2 decades, and that number could soar by millions more because of the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. A report by the United Nations Children's Fund, an international labor organization, found 8.4 million children were pushed into child labor over the last 4 years and 9 million more at risk of a similar path by the end of 2022 as a result of COVID-19.
We are losing ground in the fight to end child labor. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw the first increase in 2 decades. 8.4 million more children engaged in child labor since 2016. And now, under COVID-19, an additional 9 million children are at risk of being pushed into child labor by the end of next year. They are affected by school closures, lockdowns, lost parental jobs and income, a lack of social safety nets. Families are desperate, and they're turning to child labor as a last resort. We must not accept this. We urge countries to expand income support measures like child benefits to get children back into school where they belong, and to invest in programs that prevent and protect them from being exploited. It's time to get back on track.
The danger is that with the pandemic and everything it's done to the world of work, and we know what it's done. It's destroyed a lot of jobs, it's reduced labour income, and it's thrown a lot of people into poverty and extreme vulnerability. We estimate that the pandemic has put 108 million people and their families into working poverty. Well, in those circumstances, the danger is that people have resort to child labour almost as a survival strategy. And our estimations show that unless we act to stop it, we could see a further increase in until the end of 2022, of some 9 million in child labour. This would take us further in the wrong direction. But it's not inevitable. If we do the right things, if we invest in the fight against child labour, invest in social protection and income support, we can stop that from happening and get back on track to where we want to get to.
And also an update on the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has eased travel advisories for Kenya and South Africa as many countries' vaccination programs against COVID-19 progresses. The U.S. has downgraded Kenya's travel advisory to level 2 from level 4, allowing American citizens to travel into the East African country, but with caution. Under the fresh advisory published by the U.S. State Department, travelers coming to Kenya have been cautioned to beware of health issues. The U.S. has further warned its citizens to desist from traveling to the Kenya-Somalia border and some coastal areas because of insecurity. The advisory has also placed South Africa at level 3, allowing U.S. travelers who are fully vaccinated to visit. However, the change does not mean that South Africans can travel to the U.S. And in Algeria, officials have set up mobile COVID-19 vaccination centers in several districts around the capital as part of a national campaign to speed up its vaccination drive. Citizens flock to walk-in vaccination tents to receive their first or second dose, with one location in the Kitani Square neighborhood attracting 200 people on the first day of the campaign. The campaign, which started on Sunday, is expected to continue until September. Algeria has administered at least 2.5 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine so far. Assuming every person needs 2 doses, that's enough to have vaccinated about 2.9% of the country's population. The country has recorded a total of 131,647 coronavirus cases and 3,537 deaths caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, UNAIDS Executive Director says the inequalities exposed by the colliding pandemics of HIV and COVID-19 is a wake-up call for the world to prioritize and invest fully in realizing the right to health for all people without discrimination. A statement comes after the UN General Assembly adopted a new political declaration to guide the future direction of the AIDS response over the next 5 years. She says the political declaration is an important step forward for the world to reach the goal of ending AIDS by 2030.
The declaration is ambitious, and most importantly, it is achievable. It includes targets prepared by us UNAIDS using an inequalities lens, and these are targets to be achieved by 2025, halfway. The targets are inclusive, they are progressive, and will save lives if achieved. If all countries reach their targets, new infections will be reduced by 75% by 2025. The number of people dying from AIDS-related illnesses will be reduced by about 65%. If countries, though, continue business as usual, we will fail. The evidence, the analysis is clear. Inequalities are driving the HIV pandemic. The very people most affected by HIV, these are mainly women and girls in Africa, men who have sex with men, sex workers, people who inject drugs, transgender people, and people in prisons. They are being left out of health programming, and they are the most vulnerable to HIV.
To politics now. A Zimbabwe High Court has dismissed a contempt of court case brought against Chief Justice Luke Malaba. Mr. Malaba is at the center of a legal wrangle following last month's court ruling that the president's decision to extend his retirement age from 70 to 75 years was illegal. The ruling effectively terminated the 70-year-old Mr. Malaba's term. He returned to work after the Justice Minister and Attorney General appealed the ruling, prompting a human rights lawyer to sue him for contempt, saying the 70-year-old should be jailed for 6 months. In May, Parliament voted to amend the Constitution to allow Supreme and Constitutional Court judges the option of extending their terms to 75 years of age. A High Court ruled that the provision could not benefit sitting judges without going to a referendum. The appeal is yet to be heard. And congratulations are in order for Zimbabwean novelist Sisi Dangaremba, who has been announced as the winner for this year's Pen Pinter Prize. As the winner, she will be speaking at a ceremony hosted by British Library and Free Speech Campaigners English Pen on the 11th of October. The prize was established in the memory of Nobel laureate Harold Pinter, a British playwright who died in 2008. Dangaremba's latest book, The Mournable Body, was shortlisted for Booker Prize last year. The writer and film director was born in Mutoko town in the northeast of Zimbabwe when it was under white minority rule. She wrote her first novel, Nervous Conditions, at the age of 25, and it went to win the African section of the Commonwealth Writers' Prize in 1989. She has become a critic of the government in Zimbabwe and was arrested last year for protesting about corruption and the failing economy, saying it was necessary to speak out. Well, congratulations to her. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shibowale. Bye for now.